All right. Then hello everyone and welcome again. Thank you for joining us for this webinar on responsible influencer marketing. My name is Nina Hamann and I'm the Public Policy and Communications Officer at IAB Europe, and I will be moderating the session today. Influencer marketing has grown quite rapidly and is now a firm part of the advertising landscape. At the same time, it is attracting increasing attention from policymakers and regulators because of questions around transparency, authenticity, and also consumer protection. Today's session aims to explore how policymakers, regulators, and industry can come together and work together to ensure that influencer marketing develops responsibly across Europe. We will hear first from two short presentations. One is from the European Advertising Standards Alliance, EASA, on its ad ethics program, and then from the European Commission on the upcoming Digital Fairness Act with a special focus on influencer marketing. And after these presentations, we will move into a panel discussion where we will draw on the national perspectives from France, Germany, and the Netherlands. And we're also going to hear from the industry on the practical experiences. So for the benefit of our audience, if you have any questions during the session, please submit them via the Q&A function. It would also be great if you could indicate which organization you're coming from and who the question is meant for. We will answer them at the end of the webinar during the Q&A portion. And with that, I would already hand over to Alexandre Dérobert. He's the Public Affairs and Policy Manager at EASA for his presentation. Alexandre, thank you for coming, and over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I'll share my slides. All right. And slideshow tech. All right. So as I said, really a pleasure to be here. And let's kickstart this this presentation. So I'll start with one figure, which is quite telling. Regarding basically the global market size of influencer marketing in 2025 is 32.6 billion euro, which is really sizable. So considering this, of course, this calls for a cautious and a responsible approach by influencers towards the transparency, in particular, of any commercial content they have. So yeah, this clearly needs to be taken into account by influencers, and this need is also reflected by another figure from the EASA network, the complaint figure of 22% of online ad complaints being related to influencer marketing. Also interesting is the fact that 77%, so like 3/4 of them, are about inadequate disclosure. This is why also it's so important for self-regulation to step in and to deliver awareness raising tools. We'll come to that later. Now, one might think, okay, if there is a lack of disclosure sometimes, or issues with influencer marketing, maybe there is a lack of rules. There's a lack of legislation. Who knows? So let's have a look at the recent legislative acts that have been adopted. So the UCPD and Fair Commercial Practices Directive actually applies to influencers insofar as they are considered traders. Also, the AVMSD, Audiovisual Media Services Directive, requires that communication should be recognizable as such. So as far as influencers, content creators are considered audiovisual media service providers, they should also make sure that their ads are recognizable as such in their content. The GSA, well, the scope is a bit different for the Digital Services Act, but clearly there are also obligations, this time on platforms, to make a tool available for influencers to disclose the commercial contents. Then, of course, in the future, there may be other legislative initiatives applying to influencers. But let's really be aware of what already exists and let's make the most of it and enforce it maybe before turning to other possible rules. So that's also why I have the next slide, which looks a little bit, which is basically a Venn diagram, which I love. So you have consumer law, uh, including the unfair commercial practices, which is the safety net. I'm sure that Denisa will speak about it, so let's not deep dive in it. But this is very important, a principle-based approach. And it applies, of course, to influencers and influencer marketing, along with the more sector-specific legislation, including the Audiovisual Media Services Directive. So you can really see how influencer marketing and advertising, by the way, at large, is across these different pieces of legislation. Then the applicability of consumer law is to influencers is because they're considered traders, and whenever there is a commercial element, quote unquote, meaning any form of consideration from the brands, then they are basically caught by these rules and they have to apply to comply with them. On the other hand, any influencer that is considered an on-demand audiovisual media service provider should comply with all the requirements under the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, including Article 9, which is about the qualitative requirements on advertising, on commercial communications. So you have a number of criteria to determine, okay, are you or are you not an audiovisual media service provider? But here again, we see that there is actually an applicability of the legal framework to the case of influencers and influencer marketing specifically. This, of course, comes with, well, potential reputational risks when an influencer does not comply with the legal framework. So brands and agencies could fear these reputational risks. Yeah, if it's mostly occurs when content creators are unaware of the rules they have to comply with. Now, this is where self-regulation also have a very important role to play, and I'm coming now to the EASA, and its framework, its network. EASA is made of 28 self-regulatory organizations within membership across Europe, a little bit beyond the EU. Also 14 industry stakeholders, including IAB Europe, but also including the brands, including the influencers themselves as well, through the European Influencer Marketing Alliance, which is a member of EASA, plus also two digital pure play companies, well, basically platforms, Google and Meta. Also in membership, it's very important to have all the industry, advertising industry committed to the network, because that's how it can work actually. So the self-regulatory organizations, they have different tools available to apply codes of conduct. They handle complaints, for instance, but they also provide voluntary advice before dissemination of the ads or on a voluntary basis. They also provide training to the industry, and that's also the case for influencer marketing, as we will come to. So EASA's work, specifically in the field of influencer marketing, can be summed up through these four different tools, let's say. Disclose Me is an easy tool for influencers to know what kind of hashtag they should use, depending on where they are, the language they use, the platforms they use, etc. There is also a big piece of monitoring online content and advertising content online, which is implemented by self-regulatory organization. That's really a resource-intensive thing, because if you want to monitor at scale, you need clearly tech-driven tools, AI-driven tools, etc. That requires resources to put them into practice. EASA has a best practice recommendation on influencer marketing to help define the rules and help having a joint approach at the EASA level throughout the network on influencer marketing. And finally, ad ethics, which is to raise the awareness of influencer regarding the rules that they have to comply with. So specifically about ad ethics, it's ad ethics is based on two pillars, as you can see, training and certification. EASA provides a protocol. So it's like a unified approach, a standardized approach to make sure that self-regulatory organizations that have a training do it a little bit in the same way with the same in the same framework. So we standardize through the protocol the content of the training with a little bit of margin, of course, for also self-regulatory organizations at national level to complement. So we provide a basis, and they can also populate it with rules which are more specific to their codes and their national situation. Also, standardization of the assessment of the influencers during the training, how many questions they're asked, for instance. Also, the threshold that they have to comply with that they have to in order to succeed the training. On the certification side, there is also an effort on standardization, like the standardizing the frequency of the monitoring, the kind of sanctions if the influencers certified do not actually follow the rules, and also how the list of certified influencers should be published. So really the aim is to to train the influencer, to raise their awareness, and that's to the benefit of everyone actually. This is basically the extent of the ad ethics program so far. You can see that we have 11 self-regulatory organizations delivering training and/or certification. Certification, as I've mentioned before, is very resource intensive, which is why some self-regulatory organizations have started with just training influencers, and possibly as a next step, they would come to certification. And it's really encouraging, I want to say, because you see 11 self-regulatory organizations, 11 markets covered. But just at the start of the year, we were standing at 4. So now it's 11. It's still developing. Next year, there will be other self-regulatory organizations offering training under ad ethics. So a very positive development. And speaking about positive developments, and that's my last slide, there's also the evolution basically of the compliance by influencers, which shows a very encouraging trend. In France, for instance, which has most experience and hindsight with the training and certification, we see for influencers at large, from 2020 to 2024, we see an evolution from 32% compliance of content creators doing influencer marketing to an 81% compliance rate. It's quite impressive, I'd say. Also, certified influencers in France are 3 times more likely to comply than non-certified influencers. That's another data that is not on the slide, but it's also quite telling. Also in the Netherlands, you can see a positive evolution recently of the influencers before training and after training. So that's about it. I hope I'm not too much over time. And I'd be, of course, happy to take questions, but I think that's at the end of the webinar, right?
Exactly. You're perfectly on time. Thank you, Alexandre. It's very nice to see all these positive numbers as well. And without further ado, since we have heard from the self-regulatory side, I will hand over to Denisa Alexandroaiei, legal officer from DG Just, to outline the Commission's ambitions on the DFA and the specific issue of influencer marketing. Thank you so much for coming, Denisa. I'm handing over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. a pleasure to hear the recent development that Alexandre has just presented. I will shortly list the legal provisions that are applying to the influencers currently. Also, shortly mention the outcomes of the fitness check on digital fairness that the Commission has conducted end of last year, and also introduce you to the measures, to the ideas that we are currently investigating in our impact assessment, with a view of potentially adopting a Digital Fairness Act, which is scheduled for last quarter of next year. So currently, Alexandre has already mentioned that there are several pieces of legislation that are applicable to influencer marketing. I will focus a bit more on Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, but I would like also to mention that when influencers are also involved in directly selling their products, not only promoting them, so they are also falling under the normal consumer law protection rules. So that means under the Consumer Rights Directive, Digital Content Directive, Sales of Goods Directive, Unfair Contract Terms Directive. Also, when influencers are involved in political advertising, there is the political advertising regulation that is covering the activity. Now, with respect to the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, so there are, of course, the general rules on transparency, and we would say already now salient disclosure of commercial content, but also the rules on aggressive tactics are applicable to influencers. Also, they are prohibited from falsely presenting oneself as a consumer when actually they are involved in commercial practices. There is also a prohibition to not to disclose the sponsored editorial content. This is also part of the per se prohibitions in the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. And there is a prohibition of direct exhortation towards children. In other words, there is a prohibition also on influencers that are acting as traders to exhort, to urge minors to buy certain goods, or to pressurize their parents or guardians to do so. Now, with respect to the findings of the fitness check that we have concluded last year, so the Commission noticed that there is very high non-compliance with the rules, and in particular with the disclosure of commercial content. And actually, Alexandre, is really encouraging to see this great improvements in disclosing commercial content. So I saw it in France from 32% to 80% following your program. This is really very good news. So this is also for us a great sign that self-regulation also is potent. So we have noticed quite a lot of non-compliance, and for example, in the fitness checks, noted that only 20% of influencers systematically disclose commercial content. So this is one of the reasons for which the Commission now is looking into developing a Digital Fairness Act. It is an act, a regulation, or a directive, or regulation or directive that the Commission is planning to adopt by end of next year. It was announced in the work in the work document of the Commission. It has also been indicated as a key priority in the letter of intent by President von der Leyen towards the European Parliament. So, and the Digital Fairness Act in general will be focusing on various problematic practices that have been identified in the fitness check. These problematic practices include also unfair personalized advertising, unfair influencer marketing, of course, addictive designs, issues with contracting. Just a second. And problematic features in digital products, such as in video games, and also will have a important simplification angle. So we are looking in measures that could simplify and reduce the burden on businesses, while of course not impeding on the consumer protection. Specifically with respect to the influencer marketing, we are looking at three important proposals or ideas that we have checked in the open public consultation, in the call for evidence, and we will see if there is a need for them, and if so, to what extent. So first measure concerns the salience or the clear disclosure of commercial content by influencers when they engage in such commercial activities. Second, concern the potential prohibition of promoting certain harmful goods and services, such as I don't know, drug consumptions or unhealthy foods or plastic surgeries to minors. And the third area that we are looking into is a clarification that other actors, such as the brands or the advertising agencies, have also a role, an important role, and a responsibility with respect to the behavior of influencers online, namely with respect to the clarity of the disclosure of the commercial content, and also concerning the promotion of harmful goods and services to minors. So we are now collecting the data. So we have finalized the public consultation on the call for evidence on the 24th of October. We are compiling and assessing this information, and we are planning actually to come with some preliminary results on the 3rd of December before the European Parliament. So all of this is work in progress, and of course I'm very pleased to hear your questions and your comments on what I've just shared. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denisa. Very, very interesting. And I took also some notes for myself. So thank you for that great overview on the upcoming either regulation/directive. We will see what it's going to be in the end. And we will now move into our panel discussion. And I am very happy to welcome our fantastic speakers, including Luc Poulain, who's a political counselor at the Permanent Representation of France to the EU, Katharina Czarnian, who is a senior public affairs manager at BVDW, Hannah Schmidt, who is director for influencer marketing at Medialabel, and last but not least, Otto van der Harst is director at SRC. Sorry. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. Before we go into specific questions, I would like to ask each of you a very brief kind of opening remark. So from your vantage point, what does responsible influencer marketing mean to you in 2026? So if you could just give me like a one sentence answer or throw in some keywords, that would be really great. And why don't we start with Hannah, maybe? I'm start calling out some names so everyone knows when they're supposed to speak.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to take part in the panel discussion today. Influencer marketing for me in 2026 means transparency. It's a keyword we've already heard today, so that all parties are transparent in taking part in advertising practices and accountability. So if things go right or they go wrong, that everybody's accountable for the next steps.
Great. Katharina.
Yeah, I would add to that absolutely transparency and trust, I would say, maybe by design, like having that whole value chain, be aware of the responsibilities and yeah, moving more into the professionalism that we are at, but like furthering it even more. And yeah, maybe building on the legislative system that we have already into a very well functioning co-regulatory system and education on top.
Great. Luc?
Thank you very much for having me. And I would have the same words, basically transparency, responsibility, but also a deep understanding of the audience that is targeted. And I think that this echoes what has been just said regarding the responsibility of the whole value chain, being aware of the need for professionalism.
Great. And Otto? You're muted.
Sorry,
There you go.
I was not here, bro. Here I am. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm very happy to join this group and saying yes, responsibility, transparency, trust, that they're all there. It's a rebellious group of people. Influencers come and go. They pop up every day, and we need to mature them. They're young. They're not aware of rules. They're unaware of how to engage in a correct manner, and we need to do an éducation permanente. We have to constantly look at them and see where they are and how we can mature them and help them to do so. So that's why we have these e-learnings, but also other programs, and we try to address them from all kinds of ways, together with the advertising community, to make sure that it's they all fit in. I think that's a key point.
Great. Thank you, guys. Then I would start with Hannah, actually. From the point of view of an influencer marketing agency, what are the practical challenges you guys face in ensuring what we talked about, transparency and also compliance?
So a couple of our other discussion participants mentioned the value chain, and I wanted to map out for those who don't know what that might look like, what it can look like. So there can be a lead agency, then there can be a social media and influencer agency, that would be Medialabel in this case. Then there can be a creator or influencer management agency who are taking care of the creators and influencers. And then there comes the influencer. And of course, on the other end is the brand. So potentially you have 5 parties in this value chain. And of course, this is the first challenge. Communication is really key. It's key that all parties are up to date with the latest information regarding advertising standards and practices in influencer marketing. So this is something that as an agency we are working on a daily basis, educating both brands and other agencies or influencers about standards and regulations. And apart from that, of course, when we then come to implementing campaigns, we do have manual work. We are lucky at Medialabel to have our own technology to help us check standards when content goes online from influencers. So we are notified when influencers post, and we will do the last checks to ensure that all of our guidance has really been implemented in a correct way. And if it hasn't, of course, we will immediately contact an influencer or a creator management to ask them to take the content down correctly, disclaim what they're advertising, and if there are any mistakes of any sort, those will also be corrected. So that takes me back to my point of accountability. To be accountable, you also need to act fast. So this manual work, but also speed, is something that's challenging on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, so as a very quick follow-up, if there's one issue that you could fix immediately, what would it be? What's the most pressing one that you want to go now?
I think education. So the point I mentioned of having all parties in this value chain on one knowledge base. And I know that in Germany we have the influencer training. It would be great to get certification so that each party knows what standards influencers have or don't have in a very transparent way, in a very clear way, as this is something that leads to a lot of discussion, if not in our work in influencer marketing.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Otto, we're going to the Netherlands next. So the Netherlands is quite mature in the self-regulatory market. Could you explain how your program and also certification works and what outcomes you have seen so far in terms of influencer compliance and also the awareness raising?
Yeah, that's a question that I can take more than an hour to answer.
Please
I'll
don't.
try to be as quick as I can. I mean, what's really important is that we joined up with the key advertisers in our community that use influencers and that they endorse this program right from the start. Also raising the bar for influencers and saying, we're going to whitelist those who are registered as certified influencers. So they will be chosen by us big advertisers to do work with. So that meant really that we had a great influx of professionals that wanted to be part of that game. So it's a mechanic. You can start all the kinds of e-learnings you want as a self-regulatory organization, but if you don't have that push from the advertising community as such, it will be a lot tougher to establish it. So that was a very important thing. Second thing, as I mentioned, it's a young community. It is some professionals. It has some, even influencers that established their own company and they have their own studio and they're big and they know how to do and handle these things. But there's a lot of youngsters that just don't know where to start and they just go. And they're unorganized. So there's no union, there's no established community from A to Z that makes all influencers cooperate. So we have to find them and we have to talk to them through their peers. What we understood is very much they look at each other as well. They know what peers are doing. They look for trends. So when we started to establish the whole idea of an e-learning, we knew we had to do it not from a teacher perspective, but we had to teach through influencers. So it's influencers teaching influencers. And basically, one of the key success points in our program is that we have some big names that are actually doing the training. So certain chapters of the training and how to disclose and how to work with the program is done by those who they admire. And I think that is also a key point for success. And further on, we just jumped into it. We didn't know where to measure our success in the first instance, but it went very quickly. We gave them the e-learning for free the first 3 months. We just opened up and said, you can do this e-learning, get a certification for nothing, and you will be working with the bigger brands in the market. So that really brought a lot to us. I mean, over 2,000 influencers registered within the first 6 months. They now have to pay €50 to do the exam and to do the e-learning. So on the return basis, we now are at 1,300 for the second year. They have to do it every year, so they keep learning. There's new measures, there's new laws coming by, there's new European initiatives. So we need to be up to date and giving them the feeling that they are basically well prepared every year again and again. And then we need to advertise. I mean, we really need to advertise this program. So we just started an initiative to frame this within the ethics world, which is of course a European name for all these local initiatives. But we got some advertising credits from the big platforms, so we can actually advertise now also through influencers, teaching influencers.
That's great. Thank you so much. I like the idea of like catching the influencers where they actually are, where they're looking at. So you get the word out there.
Right.
So that's great. I'm going to Katharina next. From a German national perspective, how is influencer marketing currently regulated in Germany? And what do you see as the biggest gaps in the existing framework, if there are any?
Yeah. Looking at Germany, we have sort of, I would say, a three-layered approach. So we have no dedicated influencer legislation, but we do have a lot of legislation that is applying to influencers. So there's an Unfair Competition Act, there's a state media treaty, lots of different things that are also, of course, basing on European legislation. And what we also have in Germany is quite a big case law on influencer marketing. So we've got over the years quite a lot of clarification on certain rules through the case law, which is also, of course, helpful. And then as a second layer, we have, of course, the oversight. So the authorities, the state media authorities are very active, and they have been for a long time. I mean, the first guideline on ad transparency in Germany from them is, I think, from 2015. And it has always been adapted. And I think in the beginning of this year, there has also been a new version. So they're really trying to look at new trends and new things that are happening and trying to help and to educate how to do everything and how to comply in the end. And then the third layer is basically a big self-regulatory system as well. So us as BVDW, we are trying to educate the market as much as we can. We have published last week an influencer marketing landscape. We're trying to teach everyone a bit about how things are happening, what is happening, and what you need to do. But there's also the German Advertising Standards Council that is in charge of the training in Germany that has already been addressed, which is also very good and very important that this training is taking place. And they, of course, have guidelines as well. So it's a rather complex system, I would say. But all in all, it works well together and has a good basis. So that's why we say that actually the compliance or like the implementation of everything and the education of it all is the most important factor to enhance the system, I would say. So that there is, more knowledge of the rules. But I think in Germany, we have a nice combination of flexibility to address new trends, but also having a baseline of relatively clear rules that can be always, adapted. So that's a bit the system that we have. And I guess asking about the gaps, I think it's really the education point and the implementation maybe to a further extent. And also the problem, what we see when I talk to the colleagues about the training, that it's relatively difficult, what has been said already, also to reach everyone. I mean, if the agencies and the managements are bringing their influences to the training, that's great. But we also see a big development of smaller creators, of like nano and micro creators that maybe don't have a management yet or are not yet with an agency, how to reach them and how to show them how things need to be done. So that's a bit of a struggle that we have as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking like, oh, this is quite complex actually. So, totally fair that you point out education, but I also like that you threw in flexibility there because I think this is also a really important point, especially in this kind of online space, that you can always be flexible with the legislation. Okay, great. Then to Luc, over to France. France has adopted a very specific legislation on influencer marketing in 2023. Could you give us a quick overview of the French law, also what it was trying to achieve, basically, and if you already have some lessons learned since it was adopted 2 years ago?
Yes, for sure. So as you know, as you just recalled it, the French Parliament considered a couple of years ago that some aspects of the influencers' commercial communications deserved to be framed. And I would say that the first objective for us was the definition of the term influencer. So we included the definition of commercial influence and not the definition of influencers themselves. Because we believed that commercial influence as a business practice is independent of the status of the person performing it. And I think that that echoes Alexandre's first comments on this webinar, especially since content creators are particularly keen not to be stigmatized as a community. Then the second element of the legislation, of course, was regarding prohibited content, and that we mostly recall what the colleague from the Commission just said. So our general position is that, of course, all obligations imposed on the advertising and promotion of products and services are also imposed on influencer marketing. But then stricter provisions provided for by the French legislation can either consist in the prohibition of promoting a product considered problematic, or impose mandatory notices alerting the consumer. And so we thought about this legislation based on the special relationship of trust that influencers maintain with their audience, sometimes composed in part of young people, minors. And so we decided to prohibit the following practices: surgical products, non-therapeutic processes, nicotine products, the promotion also of non-domestic animals, certain financial products and services such as risk financial products or crypto assets, for instance, gambling, and also subscription to sports advice or predictions. So you see that it's quite a comprehensive list of practices, but we deemed that it was necessary to frame them in terms of this relation of trust that influencers and content creators create with their audience. And we also decided to frame other practices more like in a horizontal way. I would say for modified images or content generated by artificial intelligence, we wanted more specific mentions that content creators were using such methods. So first, it's true that we had, I would say, a period of implementation of the legislation also to bring it into conformity with the European legislation, because in the meantime, the DSA was adopted and came into force. So we empowered basically the government to amend the legislation by order to address the issue of compatibility with the DSA. So we withdrew from the legislation all provisions that were contrary to the DSA, and we also addressed other issues. So I'm not gonna come into the details of every single modification that we've done, but I would say that one of the main modifications is that we strictly applied and recalled the application of the principle of the country of origin, because as we know, the influencer market is a very transnational one, also in terms of the fact that you can target audiences that are not based in your member state. and that will lead me maybe in just at the end towards the questions that we are asking ourselves in terms of European action in that regard, of course. In terms of market surveillance, contrary to what has been said before, in France it's the Ministry of Economy that controls this legislation and that is competent to implement the law. So of course we have more budgets and human resources, but also training for the Directorate General in charge of consumer protection implementing the legislation. But we also published a guide of good practices as soon as 2023 to guide content creators and influencers, to raise also awareness among consumers, to alert them to the risks of fraud, and economic actors to inform them about their obligations. So we have press conferences, guides, videos, also media coverage of sanctions and awareness of influencers. We had a couple of very big media coverage of some actions in 2023, mostly by TV candidates or reality TV candidates that were not aware of the rules that would apply to them. The survey that we published in 2025 for the year 2024 concluded that we have almost 300 content creators checked in 2024, on which we found almost 47% of anomaly in their communications, but at the same time, only 6 administrative fines were issued. So I think that there is this gap between the wide anomalies that we still see on the market, and then a very strong incentives of all content creators to either correct their contents or take down problematic contents, bring them back into the framework, basically. So I would say that even though the main deficiencies found are misleading commercial practices or still the lack of display of a commercial intent, we still have also found misleading commercial practices on the qualities results of a product, of a service that is the subject of a promotion, for instance, or false claims regarding health or cosmetic products. Even though we have all those anomalies, we still see that there is a very limited number of sanctions in the end, because content creators are very keen on bringing their contents into the line of the general legislations, I would say. So this is, I hope I was not too long, but this is the general framework.
Okay, great. Then since we heard the Commission speaking about the DFA, I was just wondering if you could give us like a bit of a sense where the French government is thinking about the DFA, what the position might be, if you have ambitions to replicate the law that you already have in place on the EU level.
Yes. So of course, I would be cautious here because, as you might know, the French positions on the DFA are not consolidated for the moment. So we are still working back in Paris on the positions that we would like to send to the Commission, basically, and ask the Commission to bring forward. And since there is time for that, because the Commission has indicated that the DFA is anticipated for the end of 2026, it should not come as a surprise that our positions are not consolidated yet. But I would think that 2 main lines of action would have our preference. Of course, the first line of action would be some kind of harmonization in the presentation of commercial intent in the European Union. So it doesn't need to be full harmonization here, I think, but we would need the confirmation, at least at the European level, that we have some kind of harmonization in forms of guidelines, harmonized ways of displaying commercial intent, in a way basing this action on what already exists, for instance, in the member states that are part of this panel today, so France, Germany, the Netherlands, but also other very good examples that already exist in the EU. We would also have a second line of action, I would say, saying that regarding the prohibitions of content and services, of course, we would most likely advocate for a replication of what we considered necessary at the national level to the European level. So in the logic of consumer and young public protection, I think that consideration could be given to better regulate or even prohibit at the European level some types of promotion. For instance, I gave some examples before, but this is what we considered necessary in the national system. Most likely, we would advocate for some kind of a replication in at the level of the EU. And I would just end by saying that, of course, the wider agenda of the protection of minor can be the baseline of this action. And here, the French law can serve also as an inspiration or an example for certain provisions. For instance, the ban on influencer marketing on online gambling that was mentioning before is limited but not prohibited in France. In fact, the influencer can do such marketing for gambling only if the marketing refers to an online platform offering the technical possibility to exclude from the audience all users under the age of 18. So we see that we need to find the right balance between prohibiting some practices or just directing the audience towards safer platforms or safer and more responsible contents, basically.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm very conscious of time. That's why I would just move on to the Q&A section, so we have some time to address some questions from the audience. I just remind everyone that you can pop in the question in the Q&A box, and it would be great if you could indicate which organization you're from and who you're directing your question to. I already saw one question that is focused on France, actually. So, Luc, sorry, you have to talk again. The question is, globally, do influencers respect local/European regulation in France? And what do they risk if they do not comply? Does the platforms on which these influencers act do not respect legislation risk anything?
Thank you for the question. So the question relates to this question of the principle of country of origin that was mentioning. So to say, in general terms, the French legislation applies to influencers as soon as they direct their activities towards French consumers. But then we have exceptions. For instance, if they are part of the AVMSD, for instance, and they are located in another member state, then the principle of origin applies again, basically. So we have kind of three layers again. We have the national level, the European level that is covered by the principle of country of origin, and then the international level as soon as the content creators target back the French audience. I don't have the specific figures among the 300 influencers that we checked in 2024. I don't have the proportion of those influencers who are based in another country, basically outside of the EU. But the action of the national administration is indiscriminate in that regard. And we know that some influencers, some content creators, which problematic practices have been detected on the market, we know that they are based on in other countries. And some big media coverage was actually on those content creators not based in the EU. Not in France, not in the EU. So they definitely are part of the service that we are conducting. Regarding the sanctions, we have, as always in France regarding consumer protection, we have sanctions that go up to the criminal sanctions, and the maximum fines are 300,000 euros for the content creator in case of deceptive commercial practices, But of course, the checks are to be proportionate, and this principle of proportionality, for the moment, was very well respected, I think, and always applied to the content creator. So we have quite high sanctions for the moment, but again, we are also balancing this power to impose sanctions with a lot of different actions in terms of awareness raising and also guiding content creators towards respecting the legislation and understanding why we are prohibiting some contents and services.
Great, thank you. I don't see a question right now. I have one for Denisa, actually, when I was listening to you. Just a bit of a question on the third approach that you were saying on the DFA, the clarification one on like who's responsible, basically. Where does the self-regulation, like the self-regulatory initiatives, like the Ed Ethics program, for example, come into that? Is that like the angle that you're taking here, or what exactly did you mean by that?
Yeah, thanks a lot for your question. It's it's a very pertinent one, and at the moment we do not look into this measure in terms of liability. We are formulating it broader in terms of responsibility, and what we want to achieve, and actually this emerged also from the discussion that I've just heard. So is that indeed the influencers through all means is made aware that there are some obligations in place that they need to respect. And in a way, also for the brands or for the advertising agencies, there is a strong interest in ensuring that the influencer is, for example, disclosing properly the commercial content, because otherwise, reputationally, it's not. Can be a risk also in the upstream. So what I can say is that, and of course, all these measures, self-regulatory measures that we've heard of, they are extremely important in the whole constellation. So we don't think at all as a DFA measure on influencer marketing excluding in any way what is happening on the self-regulatory side. On the contrary, it's they are meant to both enforce each other.
Okay, great. To complement each other as well, I guess. Okay, perfect. Then I have one more question. I'm just gonna quickly look at the Q&A that I didn't miss anything. I don't think so. Which is directed at Alexandre, actually, right at the beginning of the webinar. Because I was wondering, when you were at the slide with all of the member states that have a program, how does that happen? Do they approach you? How do member states like really determine like, oh, we need a program and we want to do ethics?
Well, there are several ways in which so of course it has the member of EASA, the self-regulatory organization, needs to be willing to do so. And believe me, throughout the network, I believe like the vast majority, if not all of them actually, would be keen on doing that. But there are also some constraints, some local situations, etc. So the many of them approach us with questions like, okay, how is it done exactly? They also look at their peers, the other self-regulatory organization, for support. We provide this sort of best practice framework, this forum where they can exchange the best practices with confidence, and that's also how the network of self-regulatory organizations delivering training and e-learning courses, how it grows, thanks to this feedback and help from their peers. We, of course, the sort of joint platform, the common framework that we provide is also a support to them. We also encourage them actively as well to do so. So to answer your question, it's not only them like coming to us. We also encourage the network of self-regulation organizations to do so, and at their own level, you know, as we've heard before, it's also very important that the industry is behind them, because that's how they can deliver useful and efficient self-regulation. It's true for the training for ad ethics, of course, but it's also true on many other aspects of self-regulation, basically. So there are these different aspects to consider. You know, we encourage them. Very often they seem to be willing to develop a training, a course, but they also need to do with the local situation, and so it's a complicated patchwork of reasons, let's say.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. I know that you have a cut, so I'm thanking every panelist, everyone who did presentations. It was super interesting. Also, thank you to the attendees for joining today. I hope you found this webinar as interesting as me. We will circulate the recording afterwards, and I know that the marketing team wants me to plug some other events. So let's go to that slide, Nicole. Thank you. So we have some great other events that you can check out. You can register using the QR code. We have the virtual programmatic day. Then we have a future-proof creativity show. And the State of the Nation by Daniel Knapp, who's always a big hit with our members and others. So thank you again. Thank you for joining, and have a lovely afternoon, everyone.